It's December 2025, and somewhere in all this fog is a city that was once a prominent member of the Hanseatic League until neighbouring Hamburg got a little too big. Four kilometres down the Schwinger River from the Elbe, the Hansestadt Stade, or the Hanseatic city of Stade, sits among the Elbe marshes on a geest or sand ridge that sets Stade above the surrounding land. In both Old High German Stad and in Middle High German Stade referred to a naturally formed landing place for small ships, though by Middle Low German the word could also mean bank, coast or harbour. There are several towns in northern Germany located on the mouth of tributaries that have place names ending in Stade for that very reason. Settlement was already underway in the Paleolithic period around 30,000 years ago, but it wasn't until around 650 that a fortified settlement with a landing stage for ships was established around 4 kilometres further inland from the modern settlement. Whilst a castle was built here, the settlement appears to have been abandoned within 150 years for unknown reasons, though at the same time a new settlement was being built on the sand ridge. Around 900, Stade Castle was built on the Spiegelberg Hill, an area today that is the heart of the old town, surrounded by the Fischmarkt, the harbour and the Salzstraße. The first mention of the city in records dates to 934. Until the 13th century, Stade was the most important natural harbour between Cuxhaven at the mouth of the Elbe and the growing city of Hamburg, a key link on trade routes from Jutland through Schleswig-Holstein towards Hanover, Paderborn and further south. Of course, any coastal area in northern Europe in the Dark Ages is sooner or later going to find itself on the wrong end of the Viking longboat, and so it was in 994 that the Vikings first plundered the city. Swedish and Danish Vikings under Eric the Victorious conquered Stade, taking many prominent Saxons back as slaves to Sweden. By 1180, Stade belonged to the Prince Bishopric of Bremen, but that didn't stop King Valdemar II of Denmark turning up in early 1208 to conquer the city. In August, the Prince Archbishop Valdemar, different Valdemar but they were cousins, reconquered the city, only to lose it back to Valdemar II soon after. In 1209, the Holy Roman Emperor Otto IV persuaded King Valdemar II of Denmark to withdraw to the north of Elbe, allowing Prince Archbishop Valdemar to return to Stade. 2 years later, in 1211, Valdemar II, the Dane, was back and recaptured the city, holding onto it for 2 years, until Emperor Otto IV's eldest brother, Count Palatine Henry V of the Rhine, at least he wasn't called Valdemar, took the city back for the Prince Archbishop, and then repelled another attempt from Valdemar II in 1215. The following winter, Valdemar II, unable to take the city, instead just rampaged across the surrounding county. Starting in the 13th century, Stade became an important member of the Hanseatic League, the medieval commercial and defensive network of merchant guilds and market towns in Central and Northern Europe, headquartered in Lübeck, but was later eclipsed by the rapidly expanding Hamburg 45 kilometres to the east and actually located on the Elbe River. Stade's heyday lasted until the 30 Years' War, at which point it went through more than a century of almost continual upheaval and constant change in ownership, not helped by an outbreak of the plague in 1712. In 1628, the command of the Catholic League's forces, Johann Cercles, the Count of Tilly, conquered the town, and shortly afterwards control of Stade was passed over to the Swedish. In 1636, the Danish were back to take control, before Sweden recaptured the city in 1643, and in the Peace of Westphalia of 1648 that finally brought an end to the 30 Years' War, they were granted possession of the city in joint custody with the Archbishopric of Bremen. Just a few years later, in 1659, on the 22nd of May, a devastating fire ripped through the city, destroying around 2/3 of the centre. The rebuilding was pretty much to the same city plan as before the fire. From 1675 to 1676, during the Swedish Brandenburg War, the city was conquered first by Denmark-Norway, and then taken over in quick succession by a number of states of the Holy Roman Empire, until the end of hostilities at 1679, at which point the city was handed back to Sweden. Sweden's hold on Stade finally came to an end in 1712 when troops from, and you'll never guess this, Denmark, besieged and shelled the town in the Great Northern War. Between the 29th of August and 7th of September, the shelling destroyed 152 houses, a quarter of the city centre. Having conquered Stade and then the whole of the Bremen-Verden region, the Danes ceded it all to the Electorate of Hanover in 1715. 4 years later, on November 17, 1719, Sweden relinquished its claims to the region in the Treaty of Stockholm. In 1757, following the French invasion of Hanover, the Privy Council of Hanover and the Hanoverian army under Prince William, Duke of Cumberland, the third and youngest son of King George II of Great Britain and Ireland, or if you're Scottish, Butcher Cumberland for his brutal reprisals and executions for Jacobites following Culloden, took shelter in Stade. Economically, the city had been weakened by the constant changes in ownership. The port infrastructure had not undergone any modernisation over this time due to the sieges and fires of the previous century, and the city lost importance as a long-distance trade hub. In a reorganisation of the Kingdom of Hanover in 1823, the Stade region was created, with Stade as its administrative capital. This continued through the Prussian annexation of Hanover in 1866, the creation of Germany, the various Reichs, the US occupation, and its incorporation into Lower Saxony. It was only with the reorganisation of the 8 districts of Lower Saxony into 4 governorates in 1978 that the Stade region was folded into the governorate of Lüneburg. Having declined in importance and far enough away from Hamburg to be out of range for misfires, the city survived World War II completely untouched by Allied bombings. Untouched by the devastations that the 20th century wreaked on its nearby fellow Hansa, Hamburg, the central Stade is close to how it would have looked centuries ago, with the fortified moat built by various Scandinavian nations and filled with the waters of the Schwinger, topped with fortifications and bastions, forming an almost complete ring around the historic centre. Starting construction in 1967, the city became home to one of the first nuclear power plants in Germany, with the Stade nuclear power plant being constructed in Bassenfleff, close to the mouth of the Schwinger River, with the plant going online in 1972. From 1984, the processed steam from the plant was used to supply the nearby salt works. The plant was the first to be closed under the German government's plans to transition away from nuclear power and came off the grid in November 2003. 15 months later, in February 2005, the shutdown of the reactor was complete and works on decommissioning the site could commence. Originally planned to be completed by 2015, works have taken significantly longer than scheduled, with works now only due to be completed by the end of 2026. The closure of the power plant also led to the discontinuation of the salt works. Today, the city is located at the end of the Hamburg S-Bahn network, which expanded to Stade in 2007 and has benefited from the growth of both the chemical and aerospace industry along the Elbe River, with Dow Chemicals and Airbus being major employers in the region. Located in a small island within the fortified moat of the city is the Freilichtmuseum, or open-air museum, with the Alte House being the most visible part of the museum from the bridge. The island was originally constructed around 1692 as bastions for fortifications were built on land that had previously been used for lawn bleaching, the process of turning linen, hemp or cotton fabrics that were woven in their natural state, resulting in fabrics that are yellowish to greyish brown to white. The island wasn't used for much until 1825 when a military bathing establishment was built on the island, with an inn opening 21 years later, at the time only accessible via ferry. With the bulk of the fortifications being dismantled back to the basic outline of the moat, the island was connected to the 2 banks by bridges. In 1891, the city expressed an interest in purchasing the island, but the military administration leased it to the innkeeper instead. There were plans to build an open-air museum on the island from as early as 1903, which were finally initiated in 1909 when the widow of the innkeeper terminated the lease and the city of Stade was able to purchase the island from the military. The first idea of the city was to build a new domestic science school on the island, but drilling revealed that the peat soil extended to a depth of 6 metres, making the site unviable, so the school was built elsewhere and the idea to create the open-air museum was revived. In 1912, the Inselhaus, or Island House, was reconstructed on the island. It was originally a half farmhouse dating from 1841, originally from Farel near Schischel, around 50 kilometres to the south of Stade. The building didn't last long, as it burnt down in 1913. The following year, the Alte House, or Old Country House, from Huttflet, around 10 kilometres from Stade, and originally constructed in 1733, was relocated, along with a rebuilt Inselhaus. In 1967, the post mill from Reithmar, close to Hanover, some 150 kilometres away, but was originally constructed in 1632, was added to the site. This was followed by a 17th century horse-powered mill, or Güppelwerk, in 1969, a stone oven, Steinbachhofen, in 1970, and the old country grand gate, or Outlanger Prunkpforte, from Twyfenslet, 6 kilometres east of Stade, added in 1972. On December 3rd, 1992, the island house burnt down completely following an arson attack, and with nothing of the original surviving, the decision was taken to replace it with a different building. In this case, a house from Himmelpforten, 11 kilometres to the northwest of Stade, that was originally built in 1641 and was reconstructed on the site in 1993 and into 1994. Today, that building also houses the site's cafe, which is open all year round. The site is open for public 24/7 to explore, and during the summer months it is possible to go inside the Alte Hansehafen. Whilst the main seaport of Stade, which handles cargo for the local industry, is located on the Elbe River, the city centre is still home to 3 smaller harbours. The medieval Hanseatic harbour, the Alte Hansehafen, around the Fischmarkt, the new harbour, the Stadthafen, and the timber or raft harbour, the Holzhafen. The Holzhafen connects directly to the Stadthafen via a lock. Historically, it was a part of a fortification moat, but today owes its name to it being the former storage area of a local sawmill, the Zur and Kölner timber merchants. Here, the water depth is around 2 metres, and today it's the home to 3 houseboats and a boat rental company, though it's also been used as a mooring and winter storage facility for the Stade Sailing Club. The Stadthafen was built in 1880 because the limited capacity of the Hansehafen was no longer sufficient for the city's needs. Because the harbour is located behind the Schwinger Weir, it is exposed to tides and becomes inaccessible at low tide. The original Hansehafen is more than 1,000 years old and is today famous for its picturesque views of the former trading buildings, the Fischmarkt and the Swedish warehouse, which is today a museum. Following a major storm surge in February 1962, a weir and road were constructed over the end of the harbour, and consequently since 1968 the harbour has been unnavigable. At the top of the Hansehafen by the Fischmarkt is a replica treadwheel crane that was erected in 1977 on the site of the original Stade salt crane from 1661, modelled on a similar crane in Lüneburg, although this replica doesn't have the internal mechanism, instead being a convenient kiosk space during the Christmas market. The original crane had survived until 1898 when it was demolished as it had become dilapidated. The Altes Rathaus, or Old Town Hall, is the 1667 Baroque rebuild of the original building that was first documented in 1279, but was destroyed in the fire of 1659. The richly decorated doorway features the coat of arms of the Kingdom of Sweden, held by 2 lions, a reminder of who was in charge when the building was reconstructed. Just behind the old town is the church of Saints Cosmas and Damiani, one of 2 evangelical Lutheran churches in the centre of the city. It's believed the church is built on the site of a chapel of the Counts of Stade, mentioned in the 1130s, but nothing of that building survives. The current brick building is a result of almost continuous renovations and alterations to a building first constructed in the 1200s, with the oldest parts being preserved in the nave, transepts and vaulted crossing. Works continued well into the 17th century, with repair works required to replace the spire, roof trusses and all the interior fittings following the fire of 1659, with this works only being completed in 1684 when the Baroque cupola, which remains one of the key landmarks of the city, was added. The tower rises to 62.45 metres without the weather vane. The Baroque theme continues inside the church with a large organ built as part of the post-fire repairs between 1668 and 1673, and the high altar, which goes full Baroque, which may explain why it took 3 years to complete. Just around the corner from this church is the site of St John's Monastery, which existed as early as 1236, though the buildings that survive are for much later, city fire and all that. The monastery was founded by Franciscans and was then converted into a poorhouse in 1526 during the Reformation. The current building was erected in 1672 and was attached to a church building which occupied the now vacant northern side of the central quad. In the centre of the quad now sits the statue called Reading Monk. The second of the 2 central churches is the church of St Wilhadi. St Wilhadi was the first bishop and founder of the Diocese of Bremen, so it's perhaps fitting that the church hall is the largest in the Archbishopric of Bremen. The church is a little older than St Cosmas, tracing its history back to the early 11th century, with the current church being a 3-aisled Gothic construction from the 14th century, though the main western tower has its origins in the previous century. Works to install a new heating system in 1986 uncovered remnants of that earlier church. The church has been repeatedly struck by lightning and fires. In 1511 the tower burned down, taking the organ and bells at the same time. In 1576 a new pyramidal spire was added. The roofs and spire along with the interior fittings were once again destroyed in the city fire of 1659. As part of the rebuilding works in 1667, a massive Baroque spire was built. This spire was damaged in the bombardment of the city by the Danes in 1712, and then finally destroyed by lightning in 1724. The church returned to having a pyramidal roof in 1765. The church has earned the nickname the Leaning Tower of Stade due to the westward lean of its tower. Stade is located at the end of the S5 S-Bahn line, approximately 60 minutes journey from Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, and is also served by RE5 trains from Hamburg to Cuxhaven, taking around 45 minutes. Hamburg Airport is the 5th busiest of Germany's airports, a base for the low-cost arm of Lufthansa Eurowings, and has links across Europe, North Africa and the Gulf states, including the German hubs of Munich and Frankfurt, as well as Europe's other major hubs of London Heathrow, Amsterdam Schiphol, Paris Charles de Gaulle, Madrid Barajas and Istanbul.